Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Operations at SBAM, and I want to welcome one of our new members. They are Peach and Honey. They're actually a 2025 winner of the Michigan Celebrate Small Business Micro Business Award. So thanks for joining, and we're going to actually talk a little bit more about Michigan Celebrate Small Business later in the program. All right, we do have a very special guest who has joined us today from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. But before we get to that conversation on healthcare affordability, Brian, the IRS has released new tax brackets adjusted for inflation. I think you have some details to share with us.
Yeah, I'm going to share two things. First are the brackets themselves. I'll share my screen. It's easier to maybe retain it by putting it up on the screen. So what you might, I'm sure everybody watching here, most of you are pass-through entities, so you're well familiar with the fact that the federal government has a graduated income tax. And so your tax rate depends on the level of income. And so each bracket is taxed according to the rates that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. And there are separate thresholds for those who are filing single and married filing jointly. So as you can see, those tax brackets there, and just kind of estimating where it is that you fall in it. And again, as a reminder that let's say that you're in this 32% tax bracket. Well, really, it's only the part of income that's over 201,000 but less than 256,000, or if you're married filing jointly between 403 and 512,000, that's taxed at 32%. The amount below 201,000 is taxed according to these other rates here. It's how the graduated system works. Every single year, these amounts are increased. Okay, the dollar, not the percentages, but the dollar amounts for the threshold. So in other words, a higher degree of income would fall into the lower tax bracket. And in this case, there's kind of a sliding scale that they use. Not every bracket is increased at the exact same rate. So this lower tax bracket here at 10%, for example, and these lower several, I think, were actually increased by 4%. So the amount of money you can make and stay in that was increased in those lower tax brackets was increased by 4%. It's more like I think it was 2.3% at the higher levels, and then that kind of averages out to the annual inflation. The other thing I wanted to share with you today is also the just very common deductions and credits that people use and the changes that are being made. You might recall from back in the Jobs Cuts and Tax Act, the last kind of major tax reform before this year, it increased the standard deduction by quite a bit. And so now you see those standard deductions for single filers. These are just the first. Now 16,100 is essentially tax free. The and for joint filers, 32,200. Now, this is the reason why a lot of people don't itemize deductions anymore, because your standard deduction itemization only makes sense if it exceeds your standard deduction. And so there's a lot of folks that now that they fall underneath that. Child tax credit, it is indexed to inflation moving forward, but that didn't start this year, so that's staying the same. And then the SALT deduction, this stands for state and local tax deduction. I think for our audience, this is probably the most important one, because this is how much of your state and local taxes can you use as a deduction against your federal taxable income. In other words, if everything you pay in your state income tax, for example, how much of that can you deduct against your federal taxable income before you apply that rate? And in this case, those have been increased a lot under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And in the tax year 2024, the state and local tax deduction was something like 10 or 12,000 That's the cap. So any taxes you paid to state and local governments over and above that, you could not deduct in your federal taxes. That now for a joint filer is up to 40,400. In the tax year 2025 that we're in right now, it'll be 40,000. Next year in 2026, 40,400. So that's a big move. And for many, many more taxpayers, they'll now be able to deduct the all or most of their state and local taxes. So pretty big changes. I was kind of surprised, frankly, that in a government shutdown that they published new rates. So apparently not everything is shut down at the moment. So those but this is a pretty important time for them to give out this type of information as people are preparing, especially employers preparing for withholdings and payroll companies and that sort of thing, but also for tax planning purposes.
All right. Well, thanks, Brian. I'm going to turn it over to you for a conversation with our special guest, Andy Hetzel with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan.
So Andy is the VP of Corporate Communications for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. And so we love to have Blue Cross on from time to time to talk about all things health insurance. And we really have noticed a lot of activity lately with Blue Cross out first of all, leading the way in some really important ways, reducing administrative expenses, trying to really go after pharmaceutical expenses that have been really driving up rates across the board, taking some pretty direct action to try to bend that cost curve down. But Andy, as you as I think so. First of all, thanks for joining us. But I think a good place for us to start here is is if you could help us unravel a mystery that maybe a lot of small business owners uh, which is where does the money go? People pay these premiums and they're big, especially if you have a lot of employees and you offer good benefits, you pay these premiums and it's going for healthcare and that sort of thing. But really, at the end of the day, where are those premium dollars going? Help us shed some light on what is driving the experience that people are having lately in health insurance.
Thanks, Brian. And I want to start by just calling out to your audience that if any of you have Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Michigan as your insurance, we want to thank you. We appreciate your business and your partnership with us, and we're here to serve you. And me being here today is part of that service. I think that earlier it was mentioned, healthcare costs and, health insurance costs. What I want your audience to understand, Brian, is that those two things are separate but related. Health insurance cost is downstream in the equation. Health insurance costs are reflective of two things: the cost and expense of the healthcare system, so healthcare costs, plus the use of those services. And right now, what we are seeing in the economy of healthcare is we are seeing prices for medical care go up well beyond the rate of inflation, prices for prescription drugs and specialty drugs going up well 5 times faster last year than inflation. And all of those upstream pressures right now are being felt by your members, who I'm talking to today, in their health insurance premium, because the entire cost of the system and the use of that system flows down into the health insurance premium. And I appreciate you putting this graphic up because it does give your audience a really good idea of where their dollar in health insurance premium is spent. The answer, where does your health insurance premium go, is that it pays for the vast majority, it pays for health care. 47 cents of that dollar gets paid to hospitals for the care provided there. 25 cents of that dollar goes to doctors and other medical professionals, physical therapists, and others. 21 cents of that dollar goes to pay for prescription and specialty drugs, and that cost is accelerating very, very fast. I can talk a little bit more about that if you want. There's taxes and fees and other costs of doing business, which your members are very familiar with. And then the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan cost, which is about 9 cents on the dollar. But last year, because healthcare costs increased much faster than our pricing was able to keep up with, Blue Cross actually paid out $1.04 for every $1 in premium that we took in. So those are those 4 extra pennies in that graphic. But we feel, and we've gotten a great response to this graphic since we published it on our blog, mibluedaily.com/affordability. Anybody can go there. It's free information. But we've gotten really good response because ordinarily, when people think about their health insurance expense, they don't naturally think about it going to pay for health care, especially if they themselves are not using a lot of health care.
Yeah, it is a great graphic, and then also when you consider those extra 4 pennies there, the extra, ultimately the amount that was charged in premiums was less than what was paid out for healthcare. So these are upstream before you get to the rates. This is what's happening upstream with healthcare itself. So help connect the dots here then. How does this impact or how does this translate into the rates that small business owners pay for their employees' health insurance?
So, just a little bit about the cost pressures that we're facing. So, last year, our prescription drug claims expense, so this is the amount we spent on prescription drugs for our members, grew by 15%. That was 5 times faster than inflation. And medical care costs have grown substantially. And so, those cost increases plus what we're seeing across the board, all access points for healthcare, is that people are getting healthcare services at almost record levels wherever they access them. And so what we're seeing is a lot of use of a very expensive system, and this is the result. So over the last 4 years, you can see this is Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan's health insurance business. And you can see that we've lost money on health insurance, which is our core business, every year for the last 4 years. So those negative operating margins put pressure right now on the premiums that your members are seeing in their renewals and that they had seen last year in their renewals. So I think this is the second or even third consecutive year of substantial rate increases for small businesses in Michigan that are driven by these losses. And if we can transition to the next slide, your members can see the effect. So 4 straight years of financial losses on healthcare lead to what you're seeing on the right side of this graphic. So those are the years 2022 through the current year, and you can see that the average rate increase, that's the average rate increase of 8.6%. Some of your members are getting rate increases that far exceed that right now. That's the average from 2022 to 2026, and you compare that to the average Blue Cross small group rate increase between 2015 and 2021 on the left side of that graph of only 1.2%. So we were successful for a very long time before the pandemic at keeping small employers' health insurance rates very moderated. So it was predictable. Business owners kind of knew what they would be spending year over year. And now what we're seeing, because of the cost growth in the system upstream, we're seeing a lot of unpredictability and a lot of stress in rates. And so small business owners especially are facing very, very substantial rate increases that are the direct result of the costs in the system that have led to the financial losses and Blue Cross's core health insurance business for the last 4 years.
And just in case some folks might not know what the acronyms are, that if you see BCN, Blue Care Network, that'd be the Blue Cross's HMO, and then of course the PPO, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. So one of the things that is probably obvious to most of the audience here that pays attention to these things, that every time you turn around, it seems like there's more and more consolidation in the healthcare like these health systems have just become massive, and there's just continuous like acquisition of new providers. So we see it with hospitals consolidating with other hospitals. We see it in different types of practices. Private equity buying up all the anesthesiology practices in an area, for example. You see a lot of consolidation, and it seems as though that consolidation is at least correlated with rising costs. And so help me connect the dots here. Is my imagination running wild? Is consolidation part of the problem here?
Consolidation in Michigan is a recent trend. And what's happened nationally, though, has been studied over and over again by independent organizations like the Rand Corporation. And in all of those studies, it's been determined that health system consolidation has led to higher prices. So the big get bigger, and because they're bigger, they can leverage that size and scale in their negotiations with health insurance companies on payment rates. And so when we contract with a health system, Blue Cross and the health system get into negotiations and we set the payment rates for every service that is delivered in that hospital. And those are all negotiated between the health system and the insurance company. Now, what we're seeing is a lot of pressure on those negotiations as a result of health systems consolidating and getting bigger. So in Southeast Michigan, for example, the three largest health systems in Southeast Michigan just a few years ago had 30% of the market. Now, those three systems have 65% of the market. And so they're much bigger, they're more powerful, and in their negotiations with us over payment rates, they can express that power in those negotiations and drive prices higher. I will say, though, that we recently concluded negotiations with Corewell Health, largest health system in Michigan, and in a very positive way. What we decided to do was to keep increases in payment fair and reasonable to account for the health system's increased costs, their labor costs, inflationary costs, and then move a significant portion of the total payment into what we call value-based care, which is the health system and the insurer agree on things that we can do together to lower the overall cost and improve the experience of healthcare for patients. And if we hit those results, then the health system gets paid. It's a performance-based way to pay. We're paying for results, not paying for volume, and that's very important going forward. It's what we're trying to achieve with all these health systems.
Yeah, I mean, intuitively, it makes a lot of sense that you would try to avoid like just the volume based would encourage just high utilization. And if you can get good health outcomes with less utilization, it seems like trying to line up the payment system with something that doesn't guarantee a maximization of utilization. Because one would have to conclude is if you look at that first slide with the total dot like the amount charged per procedure is going up higher than inflation, but it's not wildly higher. But if you look at utilization, it's just gone up so much. You put higher than inflation increases together with much higher utilization. Um, and then when you consider that you're paid based on volume, it sort of makes sense that they would have a system that at least create an incentive for higher utilization, which drives cost.
The old fee for service system incentivizes volume. I say it's like the grocery store checkout line, right? So every service performed in the hospital goes across that scanner and gets billed to the insurer, regardless of whether or not the patient gets better, their health outcomes improve. And we're talking about this sort of multiplied over hundreds of thousands of patients in these health systems. And so if we can align on doing something positive with our payments, so paying the health system to achieve certain measures regarding hospital readmissions or the rates of sepsis within the health system that drive up that urgent care, that emergency care within the health system, we can lower costs on a macro level and make healthcare more affordable.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really important to us that, because people pay their premiums to insurance companies and more people choose Blue Cross than any other insurance company, that's people kind of naturally, that's where they think, well, these rates are set and this is where the issue is. But if you look upstream, you can see uh, that, sadly, Blue Cross has been undercharging compared to the actual experience, the premiums. In other words, premiums haven't been as high as the claims. And so obviously that's not sustainable either. It does require action. Okay, so Andy, thanks so much for joining us. Let's close it out with like, so what is a person who owns a business today that wants to provide great insurance for their employees? Any suggestions? What are they to do?
Well, the first thing I'll just point to our site again because it is a resource for your members. mibluedaily.com/affordability. There's tons of information there. If you want to learn more about some of these things we've been talking about today, go there. Second thing I'll say is work with your agent and benefits consultant. And they're the experts. They are your partners. They're there to help you sort through your options. At Blue Cross, one of the things that we're doing is providing more than 3 dozen options for small employers to be able to pick and choose the types of benefits that they want, that they can offer their employees and keep that price as affordable as possible. And at the same time, encourage your employees to do the things that they need to do to stay healthier. Remember, this challenge is because lots of people are using a very expensive health system. So part of the solution is personal responsibility and accountability. All of us taking steps every day to become healthier people. And as an owner of a small business, you can always encourage your employees to do that through your benefits, but also just through daily interactions with them. Did you walk today? Are you running? What are you doing to work out? That type of thing. It's so very important.
It reminds me, we have an app here at SBAM where there's fitness challenges and competitions between the team. It's just a fun thing. It's not like, cutthroat competition. It's just, but the idea of just some accountability and fun and gamification even of health. Andy, thank you so much for joining in with our briefing today and for some great insights. Share the link as well if people want to take a look at those graphs, but a whole bunch of other information as well. Andy, thanks for your partnership with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you all. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks again, Andy. That was a really helpful and insightful conversation. We do have a couple of more topics to cover as we close out the briefing today. It's kind of a hard pivot here. But Brian, let's talk about the potential for a fresh trade war with China.
Yeah, this for a lot of people, it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere that there was that China had essentially notified most countries around the world that there were going to be new restrictions and controls on the export of rare earths, they say, are rare earth materials that are important for technology. All the things that we use every day, computers and smartphones, but all other types of technology that use things that are sourced in China. So the exports would be more restricted moving forward, and even the export of technology that is utilized to get at these rare earths also um, restricted. And in this, there's so much of it that is sourced in China that it China does have a very strong position in this area, and it's there's things that are the conveniences of life, but also very necessary things, including the national defense systems that require these things. So this is a pretty big deal. What happened, and now it did result in a pretty strong response from the president in like an additional 100% tariff on Chinese imports, and so now there's kind of an escalation that China is going to respond to that, and so this it does kind of put us in a position where some of the jitters from several months ago kind of back on the front burner. Now, there are a few things that are being, I'll say, fairly quietly talked about, and one of them is a summit of some sort next month, or perhaps even this month in South Korea between the President Jinping in China and President Trump. So they are still talking, which is generally good, but and both countries have a lot at stake. Both countries have, say, quite a bit of reliance on the other and how things are structured currently. So it was just one where it seemed like we hadn't really been talking about tariffs and trade wars for a couple months. And then all of a sudden, late last week, it was like right there, and not just there, but with really the most consequential of other countries to have a dispute with. So um, it's back on the front lines, but one thing that I've become a little bit immune to the big swings on these things, because it tends to be that over and over again we see whether it's the US or other countries in response to the US kind of swinging big and going way out there and then pulling back. So this really does have all the hallmarks of that, and but we'll see. It's something to keep a close eye on, and definitely the most consequential of trade relationships out there, and that trade relation is not new. That it's there's plenty of tension, but definitely an escalation at the moment.
All right, at the top of the show, we referenced one of our new members who happened to be a 2025 Michigan Celebrate Small Business winner in the category of micro business. But we are still accepting nominations for the 2026 awards ceremony. So Brian, give us a little bit of detail and I'll drop the URL in for people to learn more.
We just have a few more days that you can nominate somebody for next year's awards. It's a very extensive process that we go through with several other organizations to select the 50 companies to watch, the minority-owned businesses of the year, the women-owned businesses of the year. There's a couple of alumni awards of the 50 companies to watch that are given out as well. Veteran-owned business, even have a category now for people with disabilities that own businesses, which is a cool new category from last year as well. So there's a window when you can nominate. Anybody can nominate anybody else for any of these awards, and we do have record nominations this year already. But of course, we still want more, because even if somebody is not recognized, if they're not selected to win one of these awards, there are a lot of great partners that are involved in the Michigan Celebrate Small Business System. The Edward Lowe Foundation is involved. Connexus Group is involved. The Michigan Black Business Alliance, the West Michigan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, it's a veterans organization, the SBAM itself, very connected in with MEDC and other resources as well. It really is a connection to a lot of organizations just to be nominated and then to apply. So Sarah dropped the link in the chat. Please do think about some small business that you know that is doing something really cool. And there's different criteria for different awards. The micro business, we have the 50 companies to watch. It's the bigger kind of second stage mature growth companies that are still small, but then also micro business, which would generally be those with fewer than 10 employees. So that's a really good opportunity to put small businesses up on a pedestal, which is what we aspire to do in this process. Few more days left, and by the way, it's a blast too. The award ceremony, it's at the Breslin Center. It's a literal red carpet event. It is a very, very big deal to win one of these awards, and small businesses who participate in it have gone through it, gotten the award, and gone to the gala, walk away truly feeling celebrated, which is the point of the main point of the whole thing.
All right. Yeah. So while you're at it and you're nominating a business or nominating yourself, be sure to mark your calendar. Go ahead and save that date right now, April 21st and 22nd of 2026, so that you have no excuses and you can join us then. All right. That is our show for today. We will be back here next Monday. Have a wonderful week.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.